He saved an Apache woman from certain death. What her tribe did next changed his life. The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast Arizona desert, painting the sand and rocks with warm shades of orange and gold. The air was dry and hot even at this early hour, and the wind carried a faint, dusty taste that made it hard to breathe. A lone man rode slowly along the narrow trail, his horse's hooves making soft thuds against the hard earth. He was a frontiersman, a man who had spent most of his life wandering the wild lands, surviving on skill, courage, and careful observation. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the horizon for any sign of danger. Years of traveling alone had taught him to trust nothing and no one immediately. He had been on the trail for several days, traveling through the rugged canyons and arid plains, when he noticed something unusual. A few hundred yards ahead, the outline of a figure crouched near a cluster of rocks caught his attention. At first, he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a coyote or a wild dog, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a human being. The figure was small and hunched over, moving in a way that suggested fear or exhaustion. As he approached, he could see that the person was a woman, and not just any woman, but a native woman, with features he recognized as Apache. Her clothing was torn and dirt-stained, and her hair, long and dark, hung loosely over her shoulders. She was clearly in distress, and her eyes widened with panic as she saw him coming. But what made him tense up immediately was the presence of another group, men, heavily armed and moving quickly toward her. They shouted in a language he did not understand, waving spears and sticks. The scene was violent and urgent, and the air seemed to tighten with danger. He didn't hesitate. Despite knowing the risks of interfering in a conflict he did not fully understand, he spurred his horse forward. His instincts told him that if he did nothing, the woman would not survive. The men were closing in fast, and it was clear that she was outnumbered and defenseless. Pulling his rifle from its strap across his shoulder, he readied himself for what could be the most dangerous moment of his life. His mind raced, thinking of possible strategies, but deep down he knew there was only one choice: act quickly and decisively. With a shout to distract the attackers, he urged his horse forward, kicking up dust in a cloud that momentarily blinded the pursuers. The men faltered, their attention drawn to him, giving the woman the chance to move. She scrambled to her feet, her movements awkward but desperate, and he waved at her to follow. His voice was firm but calm, carrying over the roar of wind and the distant shouts, telling her to run with him. The moment felt suspended in time. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as adrenaline surged through him. Each step, each motion, required precision. One wrong move could cost him his life, or hers. The attackers recovered quickly, advancing again, but he managed to put himself between them and the woman, using the horse as both a shield and a way to gain speed. He fired a warning shot into the air, not to harm, but to startle and confuse. It worked. The men hesitated, giving them the split second they needed to escape. Finally, they reached a small shaded ravine where the terrain would slow their pursuers. The woman stumbled, almost falling, and he grabbed her arm to steady her. She looked at him, wide-eyed, a mix of fear, relief, and something else he could not immediately name. She was trembling, and it wasn't just from the exertion. It was clear that the events she had endured were far worse than anything he had imagined. He dismounted, pulling her gently behind him, and led her to a spot behind a large boulder. There, hidden from sight, they paused. He handed her a small water skin, urging her to drink slowly. She obeyed, still silent, and he noticed the faint scars and bruises that marked her body, evidence of the attack she had just escaped. His mind ran through the possibilities. Why had she been attacked? What had led her to this point? He did not need to know the full story yet. His first priority was keeping her safe. Minutes passed, and the sound of pursuit faded into the distance. He finally allowed himself to breathe, though the tension lingered. The woman watched him warily, as if expecting another threat at any moment. He could see the intelligence in her eyes, the strength hidden behind her fear. She was not helpless in the way some might think. She had survived long enough to make it this far on her own. That made her even more remarkable in his eyes. He decided it was time to communicate. Using gestures first, he pointed to the horizon and then back to himself. trying to convey that he meant no harm. Slowly, she nodded, understanding that he was offering protection, not danger. He tried a few words he had picked up from travelers and previous encounters, hoping she might understand. Her responses were soft, broken, but clear enough to show comprehension. "My name," she said quietly, "is Island." He repeated the name slowly, letting it settle in his mind. "Island," he said. "I am, Samuel." She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a fragile connection, but it was enough. In that moment, they were no longer just two people on a dangerous trail. They were allies, each depending on the other for survival. The rest of the morning passed with careful, measured movements. He scouted the area for tracks, trying to anticipate where the attackers might regroup, and he showed Island how to move quietly, to hide behind rocks and to watch the wind and the sun to stay unnoticed. It was basic survival, but in these moments, trust was being built. She began to relax slightly, showing glimpses of the woman he might one day fully understand. By midday, the heat had become intense. The sun was now high in the sky, beating down mercilessly on the desert floor. Samuel and Island paused in the shade of a lone mesquite tree, where the air was slightly cooler and the ground more forgiving. He could see her exhaustion, the way her shoulders slumped, how she blinked rapidly, trying to keep her balance. He offered her a piece of dried meat from his pack, and she accepted it with a nod of gratitude. As they ate in silence, he thought about the risk he had taken. He knew that intervening in the lives of the Apache people could have serious consequences. They were proud and wary of outsiders, and any mistake could lead to deadly repercussions. But he also knew something deeper, something that went beyond fear or caution. Saving her life was the right thing to do. He could not leave her to die when he had the ability to help. Island, meanwhile, was processing everything in her own way. Her heart was still racing from the attack, but she felt a strange sense of hope that she had not felt in days. This stranger had risked everything to save her, and in the harsh world they both inhabited, that kind of courage and kindness was rare. She began to feel that maybe not all outsiders were enemies, and maybe trust could exist, even in small, careful measures. By late afternoon, they had to move again. Samuel guided Island along a narrow path that wound between cliffs and desert shrubs, keeping them hidden from any wandering eyes. Each step was careful, deliberate, and he remained constantly alert, scanning the horizon for threats. She followed closely, learning from his movements, absorbing every gesture and command. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, they finally reached a small, natural shelter, a shallow cave carved into the side of a rocky hill. It was not much, but it would provide cover for the night. Samuel helped Aylin inside, making sure she was comfortable and out of sight. He started a small fire at a safe distance, just enough for warmth and light. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls of the cave, creating a temporary sense of safety in an otherwise dangerous world. That night, as they sat in silence, Samuel thought about the road ahead. He knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would test both their courage and their endurance.
Island, sitting quietly beside him, seemed to understand the unspoken truth. Their lives were now intertwined, and survival depended on trust, patience, and mutual respect.
And in that quiet desert night, beneath a sky filled with stars, a bond was formed, one that would grow stronger with every challenge they faced. A bond born of courage, compassion, and the simple, undeniable truth that sometimes one act of bravery can change the course of two lives forever. The first light of dawn spilled across the desert, turning the rocks into glowing shades of amber and pink. Samuel and Island had slept fitfully in the small cave, taking turns keeping watch. Even with the danger of the previous day behind them, neither could completely relax. The desert was full of threats, both human and natural, and they knew their safety was temporary. As they emerged from the cave, the cool morning air touched their faces. The wind carried the scent of sand, dry shrubs, and distant pine trees. Samuel led Aylin carefully down a narrow path, making sure each step was quiet. Every rock, every crevice, every shadow could hide a danger. But Island followed with determination, learning from the way he moved. There was a rhythm to his steps, a careful balance between speed and caution, and she did her best to match it. "Keep close," Samuel said, his voice low and steady. "We move together. Always." Isla nodded, gripping the strap of her small bundle. She was still shaken from the attack the day before, but the fear in her eyes was mixed now with something else. Trust. It was a fragile trust, born in a moment of desperation, but enough to guide them forward. They moved through the desert for hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Samuel found paths that offered shade, ledges that blocked the wind, and small streams where they could drink. Each pause was brief, for staying in one place too long made them vulnerable. The desert was empty in appearance, but it was alive with hidden dangers, snakes, scorpions, and even humans who did not welcome strangers. Samuel knew this well, and he taught Aelin how to watch for signs. Broken twigs, animal tracks, and the faintest marks on the sand that indicated someone or something had passed that way. As they walked, Aelin began to speak more. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of the story she had been holding inside. She told Samuel about her tribe, her family, and the customs that guided their lives. She explained why she had been in danger, though she left out certain details that were too personal or painful. Samuel listened patiently, nodding, never interrupting. He knew that earning her trust required more than protection. It required respect for her story, for her world. "I thought I would die," she admitted at one point, her eyes fixed on the desert floor. "I did not think anyone would come for me." Samuel glanced at her, seeing the faint tremble in her hands. "I am here now," he said, "and I will not leave you." The simplicity of his words seemed to calm her. For the first time since the attack, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. She realized that survival was no longer just about running and hiding. It was about learning, trusting, and following someone who knew the land and could guide her safely. By midday, the heat had become almost unbearable. The sun blazed directly overhead, and the desert seemed to shimmer with its intensity. Samuel led them to a small cluster of trees, their thin leaves offering sparse but valuable shade. He set down their packs and handed Aelin the last of their water. She drank slowly, savoring each drop, and he reminded her to rest, but stay alert. They were not alone for long. In the distance, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Another group of men, possibly the attackers from before, moving quickly across the desert. Samuel's heart quickened, but he stayed calm. Panicking would do no good. It would only slow them down and make them easy targets. "We have to move," he said, his voice firm, quietly and fast. Aelin nodded, her face pale but determined. She trusted him completely now, and her fear had shifted into resolve. Together they moved along a narrow canyon that provided some cover. Samuel chose the path carefully, avoiding open spaces where the men could see them and sticking to areas where the rocks and shadows offered protection. As they progressed, Samuel noticed the woman growing stronger, more confident in her steps. The desert was teaching her resilience, just as it was testing him. Dark, he could see her learning from him, mimicking his movements and understanding the small signs of danger. Each time she successfully navigated a tricky rock or spotted a hidden obstacle, he allowed himself a small smile. Their teamwork was improving with every mile, and that teamwork might very well save their lives. By late afternoon, they reached a small waterhole hidden behind a rocky outcrop. It was a rare and precious find, and Samuel allowed Aelin to drink freely this time, replenishing her strength. While she drank, he took a moment to scan the horizon, making sure no one was following. The desert was deceptively quiet, but he knew better than to assume safety. "This is good," he said, offering her a small piece of dried meat. "We can rest here for a short while, but we cannot stay long. The sun is setting soon, and we need to find shelter before dark." Aelin accepted the food gratefully, her hands shaking slightly as she ate. She looked at Samuel, a mixture of admiration and gratitude in her eyes. "You have saved me twice now," she said quietly. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Samuel shook his head. "No one owes anyone in the desert. We help each other to survive. That is all." Despite his words, he felt a connection forming between them. a bond forged through danger and trust. He had faced many challenges in his life, but rarely had he encountered someone so courageous and so willing to learn. Island's strength and determination were remarkable, and he knew that their survival depended not just on his skill, but on her growing understanding of the world around them. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of red and purple, Samuel led Island to a small cave he had noticed earlier. It was shallow, but it would provide protection from the cold night air and any predators. He started a small fire, careful to keep it hidden, and they sat together eating the last of their rations. The firelight flickered on their faces, casting long shadows on the rocky walls. That night, as they lay close to the fire for warmth, Aylin finally allowed herself to speak freely. She told Samuel about her family, about the people she loved, and about the life she had been forced to leave behind. Her words were soft but filled with emotion, and Samuel listened without judgment. He offered no advice, no correction, only the quiet presence of someone who understood that listening could be just as powerful as any action.
In the quiet of the desert night, Samuel reflected on the journey so far.
The day had been long and exhausting, but it had also been a testament to courage and trust. He realized that saving Aylin's life had brought him more than just the satisfaction of doing the right thing. It had given him a companion, someone who understood the world as he did, someone who could face danger and still remain strong. Aylin, meanwhile, felt a mixture of fear and hope. She had been close to death, but now she saw the possibility of life beyond the attacks, beyond the fear. Samuel had shown her that survival was possible, that trust could exist, and that courage could take many forms. She knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that she would not face it alone. As they drifted into a fitful sleep, the desert stretching endlessly around them, both Samuel and Aylin understood a simple truth. Survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about trust, understanding, and the quiet courage to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. And in the vast, unforgiving desert, that courage would be tested again and again. By dawn, they would continue their journey, moving toward safety and unknowingly toward the next chapter of their story, one that would challenge their limits, deepen their bond, and change both of their lives forever. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, a vast and unbroken landscape of sand, rocks, and scrubby bushes. Samuel and Aylin had traveled for days, moving quietly and carefully, always aware of potential dangers. Aylin's strength and confidence had grown steadily, though exhaustion remained a constant companion. Samuel, ever watchful, had come to rely on her as much as she relied on him. She was no longer just someone he protected. She was a partner in survival, learning to read the land, the wind, and the subtle signs of danger that the desert offered. As the sun reached its highest point, they approached a low ridge that promised a view of the land ahead. Samuel paused, scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. Beyond the ridge, he saw the faint outline of a village. Smoke rose gently from small fires, and the structures, built from earth and wood, showed signs of life. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but with anticipation. After days on the run, they were nearing safety, the village of Aylin's people. Aylin's expression changed as she recognized the familiar shapes of her home. Her pace quickened, and a mixture of relief and anxiety filled her features. Samuel noticed, understanding that this was the moment when their journey would take a new turn. While she was returning to the safety of her tribe, he was entering a world that was foreign and unpredictable. The Apache people were proud, wary of outsiders and protective of their own. His arrival could be seen as a threat. "We must be careful," he said quietly. "We are close, but this is not over yet. Stay behind me."
Aylin nodded, understanding the seriousness in his voice.
She followed closely as Samuel led them down the ridge, choosing a narrow path that would give them cover. The closer they got, the more Samuel could feel the tension in the air. Even in a village that seemed peaceful from a distance, danger could lie in the eyes of those who saw them coming. When they finally reached the outskirts of the village, they were met by a group of children playing near a fire. The children froze at the sight of the strangers, then ran to call for the elders. Within minutes, a small crowd gathered.
Aylin stepped forward,
speaking quickly in her language, explaining that Samuel had saved her life. Samuel stood silently, trying to appear calm and respectful, knowing that his actions in the next few moments would determine how he was received. The elders approached slowly, their eyes sharp and discerning. They were older, their faces lined with years of experience and judgment. Samuel could feel their gaze on him, weighing him, testing him. They spoke quietly among themselves, their voices low but intense. Island translated some of their questions, answering honestly but carefully. She spoke of the attack she had survived and how Samuel had intervened to save her. She emphasized that he had acted without selfish motives, purely to help her. For a long moment, the elders remained silent. Samuel held his breath, unsure how his actions would be interpreted. In the Apache culture, outsiders were often met with suspicion, especially men who involved themselves in the lives of women. He could sense that his life and Island's continued trust hung in the balance. Finally, one of the elders stepped forward. He was tall, with deep-set eyes that seemed to see everything. He spoke slowly, deliberately, testing Samuel with his words. "Why did you interfere?" the elder asked, his voice calm but filled with authority. Samuel took a deep breath, choosing his words with care. "Because she needed help," he said simply. "I could not stand by while someone's life was in danger. That is all." The elder studied him for a long moment, as if searching for hidden motives. Samuel remained still, showing no fear, no anger, only honesty. Aylin, standing beside him, added her voice, praising his courage and integrity. She spoke of how he had risked his own life to save hers, without expecting anything in return. The elders murmured among themselves again, their voices low and full of deliberation. Samuel could feel the tension rising in the crowd. He noticed the other villagers watching him carefully, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He realized that one wrong move, one careless word, could turn admiration into hostility. Hours seemed to pass as the elders discussed his fate. Samuel stayed calm, though his mind raced. He thought about everything that had led to this moment: the rescue, the journey through the desert, the trust he had earned from Island. Each step had been dangerous, but necessary. And now it all came down to the judgment of these elders, who held the power to accept or reject him. Finally, the elder who had spoken first turned back to Samuel. "You have shown bravery," he said, his voice carrying through the small gathering, "and your actions have saved a life. That cannot be ignored. But you are an outsider. Trust must be earned." Samuel nodded. He understood the wisdom in the words. He did not expect instant acceptance. He only hoped for a chance to prove himself. Island stepped forward again, pleading on his behalf. She spoke of his courage, his respect for her, and the care he had taken to honor her people's traditions, even as he helped her. Her words were heartfelt and sincere, and Samuel could see that the elders were moved, even if they did not show it openly. After what felt like an eternity, the eldest of the elders raised his hand, signaling for silence. The crowd quieted immediately. "You will be judged not by words alone, but by actions," he said. "If you wish to stay among us, you must show respect for our customs, and your courage must match your heart." Samuel felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had survived the desert, but this new challenge was different. It was a test of character, of patience, and of understanding. He nodded respectfully, showing that he accepted the terms. Island smiled slightly, a quiet encouragement that reminded him of why he had come so far. The elders continued to speak, outlining what would be expected of Samuel if he were to remain in the village. He would need to prove himself through acts of service, demonstrating his respect for their ways and showing that he could be trusted not to harm or disrupt their lives. Samuel listened carefully, understanding that every word was important, every action would be scrutinized, and every mistake could be costly. As the day wore on, Samuel and Island moved through the village, observing the routines and traditions of her people. Samuel watched the hunters returning with game, the women tending to children and preparing food, and the elders guiding the younger generation. He began to see the depth of their culture, the values of honor, respect, and community that governed their lives. He understood that earning their trust would require patience, humility, and continued courage. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of red and gold, the elders gathered once more. Samuel was brought before them, standing quietly while they deliberated. Finally, the eldest spoke. "You may stay," he said, "but know this: respect is earned, and your actions will speak louder than words. Protect those who need it, honor our customs, and your heart will be known to us." Samuel bowed his head, gratitude filling him. He had survived the desert, earned Island's trust, and now had the chance to be accepted by her people. It was a moment of triumph, but also a reminder that his journey was far from over. The path ahead would require vigilance, humility, and continued courage. Island approached him, her eyes bright with relief and admiration. "They have accepted you," she whispered. "You have changed the way they see the world, and the way I see it too." Samuel smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. But he knew that the true test was only beginning. Trust had been granted, but it must be maintained. Respect had been earned, but it must be demonstrated. And the bond between him and Island, forged in the desert and strengthened by courage, would continue to guide them through the challenges ahead. As night fell and the village settled into quiet, Samuel and Island sat by a small fire outside one of the huts. The stars above shone brightly, their light reflected in Island's eyes. They spoke quietly of the journey so far, of the dangers they had faced, and of the hope that lay ahead. The desert had tested them, but it had also brought them together, showing them that courage, trust, and compassion could bridge even the widest divides. And in that quiet night, surrounded by the people who had once been strangers and now offered acceptance, Samuel realized something profound. His life had been changed, not just by the act of saving Island, but by the way her people responded. Their respect, their wisdom, and their willingness to see the good in him had opened a door to a world he had never known. A world where bravery and kindness were recognized and rewarded, and where bonds forged in adversity could last a lifetime. The next morning Samuel woke early, before the sun had fully risen. The village was quiet, with only the faint sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves in the morning wind. The night had brought little sleep, but his mind was alert, already thinking about the day ahead. He knew that the elders would be watching him closely, evaluating every action, every word. Acceptance had been granted, but it was fragile, and he could not take it for granted. Island was already awake, moving quietly around the small hut where they had spent the night. She greeted him with a soft smile, and Samuel returned it, feeling a strange sense of comfort in her presence. The bond they shared had deepened with every challenge, every mile of desert, and now every careful step in the village. Together they were stronger, ready to face whatever came next. Their first task of the day was simple, yet significant: helping prepare food for the village. Samuel followed Aylin as she guided him through the process, showing him which plants were safe to gather and how to clean and prepare them. His hands were clumsy at first, but Aylin's patient instructions helped him learn quickly. The elders observed from a distance, noting how carefully he listened and how respectfully he followed the customs. "You must learn not only to act but to understand why," Aylin said softly as they worked side by side. "The tribe watches not only your skill but your heart." Samuel nodded, absorbing her words. He realized that survival in the desert had taught him to act quickly and decisively, but here, in the village, he had to learn patience and empathy. Every action, no matter how small, carried meaning. Respect was not given lightly. It was earned through understanding, through thoughtfulness, and through consistent courage. After completing their morning tasks, Samuel was invited to accompany the hunters on a small expedition. It was an opportunity to prove himself, to show that he could contribute to the tribe's well-being. He accepted, grateful for the chance, though he knew that any mistake could undo the progress he had made. The hunters moved silently through the desert, teaching him how to read the tracks of animals, how to move without disturbing the environment, and how to anticipate the behavior of prey. Samuel listened intently, asking questions when appropriate and learning quickly. Aylin remained in the village helping the other women and children with their daily chores. but she kept a careful eye on Samuel's progress. She knew how important it was that he gained the trust of the elders and the hunters alike. Each step he took toward acceptance was a step toward a life that could be shared with her, a life that went beyond the danger and fear they had endured. By midday, Samuel had proven himself capable. He had spotted tracks that even the experienced hunters had missed, and his skill in moving silently through the terrain impressed them. The hunters nodded in approval, exchanging quiet words that Samuel did not fully understand, but their respect was evident. For the first time, he felt that he was no longer just an outsider. He was becoming part of something larger than himself. Returning to the village, Samuel found the elders waiting. Their expressions were serious, but there was a glimmer of curiosity and perhaps even approval. They spoke slowly, testing him with questions about his journey, about his understanding of the tribe's customs, and about the choices he had made to save Aelin. Samuel answered honestly, explaining his actions, his motivations, and the lessons he had learned. "You have acted with courage and with thought," one elder said finally. "But courage alone does not build trust. Understanding does. Respect does. We have seen your heart, and it is not hidden. You have saved a life, but more than that, you have shown humility and patience. For this, you are worthy of our recognition." Samuel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The words were not just an acknowledgement of his bravery. They were a recognition of his character, his willingness to learn, and his respect for the people he had entered among. Aelin's face lit up with a quiet smile, and Samuel realized that this moment was more than just personal triumph. It was a turning point that would shape the rest of his life. The elders continued, explaining that Samuel's actions had not only saved Aelin, but had also honored the values of the tribe. His willingness to protect someone without selfish motives had demonstrated the kind of heart that the Apache respected deeply. In a gesture that surprised him, they offered him a place within the village, not as an outsider, but as someone who could live among them, learn from them, and contribute to their community. Samuel was humbled. He had come to the village uncertain of what awaited him, fearing rejection and danger. Yet here he was, being offered not just acceptance, but trust, friendship, and a chance to build a life alongside people who had once been strangers. He understood that this was an extraordinary gift, one that few outsiders would ever receive. Aelin stood beside him, her eyes bright with pride and gratitude. "You have done more than save my life," she said softly. "You have shown them, and me, the strength of courage and kindness. This changes everything." The elders nodded in agreement, and the villagers who had been watching began to approach, offering gestures of welcome and acceptance. Samuel felt a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. He knew that the journey ahead would still have challenges, but he also knew that he had found a place where his actions mattered, where his heart was recognized, and where he could continue to grow alongside those who had welcomed him. In the days that followed, Samuel worked alongside the tribe, learning their customs, their language, and their ways of life. He hunted with the men, helped gather food, and participated in daily routines that strengthened his bond with the community. Each task, each interaction reinforced the respect he had earned and the trust he had been given. Aelin remained his constant companion, guiding him, teaching him, and sharing in the moments of triumph and challenge alike. As the sun set each evening, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He remembered the moment he had found Aelin in danger, the flight across the desert, and the uncertainty of the village's judgment. Each step had been difficult, fraught with risk and fear. Yet each step had also revealed the power of courage, compassion, and respect. He understood now that his life had been irrevocably changed, not just by the act of saving Aelin, but by the way the tribe had responded, by the trust they had placed in him, and by the acceptance they had offered. One evening, as the stars filled the sky and the village settled into quiet, Samuel sat with Aelin by a small fire. They spoke softly of the journey so far, of the lessons learned, and of the possibilities that lay ahead. The desert had tested them, the journey had challenged them, but now they had reached a moment of connection, acceptance, and hope. Samuel realized that life had presented him with an extraordinary opportunity to belong, to protect, and to grow within a community that valued courage, kindness, and understanding.
Eileen reached out, placing her hand on his.
"The tribe has changed you," she said gently, "and you have changed them. What we have begun here, it will last a lifetime." Samuel nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his heart. He understood that the journey was far from over, but he also knew that they had reached a turning point. Courage had brought them together, trust had sustained them, and respect had opened the door to a future filled with possibility. And in the quiet glow of the fire, surrounded by people who had once been strangers and were now family, Samuel realized that one act of bravery, the act of saving Aylin's life, had transformed his world entirely. It had created bonds that could not be broken, taught lessons that would endure, and offered a chance to live a life filled with meaning, honor, and connection. For Samuel, the desert was no longer just a place of danger. It was a place of discovery, a place where courage met kindness, and where the heart could be recognized and valued. And as he looked across the fire at Eileen, he knew that the journey they had begun together was only the first step in a story that would change both their lives forever. The days turned into weeks, and Samuel settled into life in the village. Each day brought new lessons, new responsibilities, and new ways to connect with the people who had once been strangers and were now his extended family. The elders watched him carefully, but their initial skepticism had faded, replaced by a cautious respect that grew stronger with every act of honesty, courage, and service. Samuel had learned that true trust was earned slowly, with consistent actions and a genuine heart. Eileen remained by his side through every step. She taught him the finer points of village life, the traditions that governed daily routines, the ceremonies that marked important events, and the small but meaningful gestures that showed respect for one another. Samuel listened and learned, sometimes fumbling, sometimes failing, but always trying with sincerity. The villagers began to notice, and their respect for him deepened. Children would follow him with curiosity. Women would nod in approval as he worked alongside them, and even the elders began to engage him in conversation, asking for his opinion and insight. One morning, Samuel accompanied a group of hunters on a long expedition into the nearby hills. The terrain was rugged, with steep cliffs and hidden ravines, but Samuel had grown strong and confident through his previous experiences in the desert. He moved silently, observing tracks and signs of wildlife, sharing his knowledge with the younger hunters. They listened with interest, impressed by the combination of his practical skills and his respect for the land. During a brief rest beside a small stream, one of the elders approached him. The elder's expression was serious, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. "You have proven yourself not only in courage but in humility," he said. "Your actions have brought honor to yourself and to Ayleen. The tribe sees your heart, and it is good." Samuel bowed respectfully, feeling a deep sense of pride but also humility. These words were not just praise. They were confirmation that he had truly become part of a community, that his efforts had created bonds that would last beyond the desert, beyond fear, beyond uncertainty. He realized that the journey had changed him in ways he had never imagined. The desert had tested his body and spirit, but the tribe had tested his heart, and he had passed. Life in the village settled into a rhythm. Samuel participated in daily tasks, learning to hunt, gather, and prepare food according to the tribe's traditions. He helped build structures, repaired tools, and assisted with communal projects. Every task was a chance to demonstrate respect, skill, and reliability. Eileen continued to guide him, sharing wisdom and encouragement, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Samuel also found moments of reflection. In the quiet of the desert night, sitting beneath a sky filled with stars, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first time he saw Ayleen, injured and alone, and the decision he had made to risk everything to save her. He remembered the long, grueling days of travel through the desert, the fear of being discovered by enemies, and the uncertainty of what awaited them in the village. Each memory carried with it a lesson about courage, compassion, and the power of human connection. Ayleen often joined him during these quiet moments. They would sit together, speaking softly of their past, their experiences, and the future. She shared stories of her childhood, her family, and the values that had shaped her life. Samuel listened, learning not only about her world but also about the deeper truths that guided it: honor, respect, and the importance of protecting one another. He shared his own experiences as well, though he spoke carefully, knowing that his life had been shaped by different challenges, different dangers, and different lessons. The bond between them deepened beyond friendship. It was built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and the understanding that life was fragile and courage was required at every turn. They had faced danger together, trusted one another in the face of uncertainty, and proven that compassion could bridge the gap between two very different worlds. In Aelin, Samuel found a companion whose strength and wisdom matched his own, and in him she saw a protector who valued her life and honored her culture. One afternoon, the village celebrated a special event, a ceremony to honor those who had shown courage and dedication to the community. Samuel was invited to participate, standing alongside the elders and hunters who had guided him. The ceremony was simple but profound, filled with symbols of trust, respect, and unity. The tribe recognized not only his bravery in saving Aelin, but also his commitment to learning, contributing, and honoring their way of life. As Samuel stood before the gathered villagers, he felt a deep sense of belonging. He realized that the act of saving Aelin's life had been only the beginning. The journey that followed, the lessons learned, and the trust earned had transformed him completely. He was no longer a stranger in the desert. He was a member of the community, valued and respected, with a place in a world that had once seemed foreign and distant. The ceremony ended with a feast, laughter, and music. Samuel and Aelin sat together, sharing food and stories, feeling the warmth of the tribe's acceptance. Children played nearby, elders offered quiet smiles, and the hunters nodded in approval. The sense of community was strong, and Samuel felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. In the days that followed, Samuel continued to live, work, and learn within the tribe. Every action, every choice, reinforced the trust and respect he had earned. He learned to hunt with skill and patience, to gather and prepare food with care, and to contribute to the community in ways that were meaningful and respectful. The tribe, in turn, accepted him fully, offering friendship, guidance, and support. Samuel had found a home, not in a building nor a town, but in the hearts of the people who had once been strangers and were now family. Aelin's role remained central in his life. She continued to teach, guide, and support him, and their friendship evolved into a deep, enduring bond. They shared moments of joy, quiet reflection, and laughter, finding comfort in the knowledge that they had faced incredible challenges together and had come through stronger, wiser, and more connected. As time passed, Samuel reflected on the lessons he had learned. Courage was essential, but it was not enough on its own. Compassion, respect, and understanding were equally important. Trust could be fragile, but when nurtured with patience and sincerity, it could grow into something enduring and powerful. And the bonds formed through shared hardship and mutual respect could change lives, open hearts, and create a sense of belonging that was rare and precious. One evening, as the sun set and the desert sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple, Samuel and Aelin walked together along a quiet path. The air was warm, the wind soft, and the world around them peaceful. They spoke quietly of their journey, of the dangers faced, and of the growth they had experienced. Samuel thought about the first day he had seen Aelin in danger, the flight across the desert, and the tension of the tribal judgment. Each moment had shaped him, teaching him lessons he would carry forever. Aelin smiled at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "We have come so far," she said softly. "You have changed the way I see the world, and you have changed the way the tribe sees it too. Your courage, your kindness, it will not be forgotten." Samuel nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He understood that the journey had transformed him, not just through the act of saving a life, but through the trust earned, the respect gained, and the bonds formed. He realized that life was richer, fuller, and more meaningful when guided by courage, compassion. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the people who had welcomed him, Samuel understood that one act of bravery had set in motion a series of events that would shape the rest of his life. Saving Aelin had been a turning point, but the journey that followed, The lessons learned, and the relationships formed had transformed him completely. He was no longer a solitary traveler in the desert. He was a member of a community, a friend, a protector, and a part of something larger than himself. And as the stars began to fill the night sky, Samuel felt a sense of peace and fulfillment he had never known. The desert had tested him, the tribe had challenged him, and the journey had changed him. But in the end, it had also given him a life filled with trust, friendship, and the enduring knowledge that courage and kindness could truly change the world. The story of Samuel and Eileen would be remembered in the village for years to come, not just for the act of bravery that had saved a life, but for the lessons of respect, patience, and compassion that had followed. Samuel had entered the desert a stranger, facing danger and uncertainty, and he emerged as someone whose heart and actions had earned a place in the lives of those he had come to care for deeply. The desert, once a place of isolation and challenge, had become a place of discovery, learning, and connection. And in that transformation, Samuel found something far greater than survival. He found purpose, belonging, and a life forever changed by one courageous act and the people who had welcomed him into their world.